They thought they could block my path. They thought they could crush my spirit and force me out of my own home. But they never, ever considered the one thing I owned that they desperately needed, the very water under their million-dollar paradise. One cool autumn morning, all their boats sat tethered to useless docks, their driveways suddenly ending at a deep, impassable creek, and the only way out, for a few hours anyway, was a long, cold swim. But that was just the appetizer. Welcome back to The Deed is Done. Today I'm sharing a true story from my quiet corner of the Pacific Northwest. My name is Elias Vance. I've lived in my little cabin on Cedar Creek for over 2 decades. Just me, the scent of cedar, and the river that has carved its way through my family's land since my grandfather's time. I keep to myself, fix my place when it needs fixing, and mind my own business, at least until the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, or the WCE for short, decided my bridge was their problem, and that's when everything changed. I remember that morning vividly. The air was sharp, the morning fog hadn't quite burned off, and I was on my porch with a cup of stale coffee, just listening to the water rush under the bridge. That bridge wasn't some fancy piece of architecture. It was rough-hewn timber and concrete supports, a relic built by my dad. But it was my lifeline, you understand. It connected my cabin to Highway 12, to the grocery store, the post office, even the urgent care clinic if I ever needed it. Without it, you'd have a hell of a hike through thick woods or a freezing, dangerous swim. It was strong, it was steady, and I thought, truly thought, it was unequivocally mine. I'd been hearing the whispers for weeks. Ever since Constance Hayes, the WCE president, moved into the $6 million showpiece home downriver. Constance was a real piece of work. Polished, sharp suits, clipboard perpetually clutched like a scepter. And she was on some kind of militant community image cleanup campaign. I figured I was safe. I wasn't technically in their subdivision, my cabin was neat, my grass was cut, and I certainly wasn't throwing any loud parties. Or so I thought. Then I saw the truck pull up on the far bank, a big white utility rig with obnoxious blue letters, WCE Code Enforcement. 2 guys stepped out. One in work gear looking nervous, the other in a pressed shirt and tie looking like he was auditioning for a villain role. They didn't wave, they didn't smile, they just stared at my bridge like it was some kind of eyesore roadkill. I set my coffee down, a move I instantly regretted, and walked toward them. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" I called out. The tie guy stepped forward. "Sir, this structure is non-compliant, unsafe, and violates the community visual standard." I almost laughed. "What community?" "This is my land." "That's my bridge." He didn't flinch. "You've been sent notices." I shook my head, my patience thinning. "I haven't received a single piece of junk mail from you people." The guy in gloves shifted uncomfortably, but T-Man kept going. "Under Section 9C of the Willow Creek Covenants, the association reserves the right to remove non-compliant structures impacting neighborhood aesthetics." I stepped closer, the temperature of the air dropping 10 degrees. "This bridge has been here for 50 years. It is perfectly safe." "That," he said, handing me a bright orange slip, "is not for you to decide. 7 days to remove it myself, or they'd take necessary action." I wanted to tear that paper into confetti, but instead I just shoved it in my pocket and walked away. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of a shouting match. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the wood, every distant engine hum felt like their bulldozer coming early. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was just bluster, a paper threat. I was wrong, again. The roar of industrial chainsaws shattered the quiet. I ran outside barefoot. 3 men were already on the deck, planks ripped up, the wooden railing lying in the dirt like broken bones. "What in God's name are you doing?" I roared. Constance Hayes herself stood on the far bank. Perfect silver hair, clipboard, dark sunglasses hiding her cold eyes. "Community safety measure, Elias," she called back, her voice carrying across the water, smooth as glass. "This isn't your property." I yelled. Her lips curled just slightly, a look of pure, condescending satisfaction. "It is now, I assure you." In that single moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep, frozen certainty that this wasn't over. By sundown, my bridge was nothing but two ragged, splintered ends reaching across the gap. The river didn't care. It just kept flowing, washing pieces of my history downstream. That night, I pulled out an old steamer trunk under my bed, deeds, survey maps, yellowed envelopes my grandfather left me. I was looking for proof that they had no right to touch that bridge. And when I finally found the one document, the original land survey from 1958, I had to read it twice, 3 times. The bridge, the land, yes, but also the river channel itself. Every inch of the water and the riverbed beneath it along that stretch belonged to the Vance family. The HOA had zero claim. I leaned back in my rickety chair and smiled for the first time all day. If they wanted a fight over property lines and covenants, they had no idea who they had just picked a fight with. If someone tore down your only way home, how far would you go to make them regret it? I didn't sleep that night either, but this time it wasn't due to rage. It was from meticulous, exhilarating planning. I drove into Pleasant Valley the next morning. Not to the HOA office, not to the sheriff. I went straight to the county records building. The clerk, an older guy named Walter with glasses thick as bottle bottoms, didn't say much, just stamped papers and slid them across the counter. But when I showed him the survey map, his eyebrows disappeared into his hairline. "You own all this, Elias?" he murmured. I nodded. "Bridge, banks, and the river itself for about 200 yards. He whistled a low, breathy sound. "Well, son, those fancy folks are in a world of trouble." I left with fresh, certified copies. It felt like walking out of a bank with a suitcase full of gold. Back at the cabin, I stood on the porch. The bridge was gone, but the river was still mine. And that gave me an idea so simple, so beautiful, it made my teeth ache. I made 3 calls that afternoon. First, to a contractor friend who built heavy-duty security gates for ranches. Second, to a local sign company. And third, to an old fishing buddy who owed me a favor, a guy with a barge and an industrial winch. By the end of the week, 2 massive custom-built steel gates stood where my bridge had been, one on my side, one on the far bank, locked with thick chains, bolted to concrete pilings adorned with bright red, obnoxious signs that read, "Private property, river access denied, trespassers will be prosecuted." But I didn't stop there. My buddy's barge helped me install a series of heavy-duty interlocking floating barriers across the river, the kind they use for logging operations. They were thick enough to stop anything short of a destroyer. By the next Saturday morning, the effects were undeniable. The Willow Creek Estates, those gorgeous $5 million homes built right on the water, now had no river outlet. Their $1 million view was still there, but the water had become a slow, stagnant, useless pool. Their speedboats sat tied to empty docks, the jet skis baking in the sun. The waterfront access that made their houses worth a king's ransom was now just a glorified ditch. That afternoon, I saw Constance pacing along the far bank. She had her phone pressed to her ear, jaw clenched, eyes frantic. When she spotted me on my porch, she stopped talking. We stared at each other across the gap. No words, no gestures, just the sound of the now trapped water between us. It didn't take long for the letters to start. First one, then a stack, then a thick embossed envelope with urgent legal action stamped in red. I opened none of them. Instead, I kept a small notebook. Every time a neighbor yelled across the water, every time I saw a new HOA contractor truck driving around aimlessly, I wrote it down. It was my scoreboard, and I was up by 3 touchdowns. But I knew Constance wouldn't fold easily. HOAs don't like losing control. They despise it. The first major offensive came with a low, grating rumble. Not the wind, not the creek, but something heavy. I stepped onto my porch, and that's when I saw the convoy. 2 white utility trucks, a flatbed carrying a massive, disassembled floating dock, and, leading the pack, a shiny black SUV with tinted windows. Constance stepped out. Navy blazer, dark sunglasses, clipboard still tucked under her arm like a weapon. "You lost, Constance?" I called out, my voice smooth. She tilted her head just slightly. "Not at all, Elias. We are here to restore access for our residents." I glanced at the trucks. They don't have access because they bought homes on a stretch of water they don't own. Her smile was thin, brittle. That's not how we see it. That, I said, stepping closer to the bank, is the only way it matters. She ignored me, waving the hard-hatted crew forward. They started unloading planks and metal poles. They were going to build a temporary floating dock that bypassed my gates entirely. "Private property!" I shouted. One worker looked nervous, but Constance didn't even glance my way. "You'll want to step back, Elias," she said. "Things could get messy." Messy. That was her word, her warning shot, and I knew if I didn't stop them now, this fight was over. I pulled my phone and dialed the number I hadn't used in years. It rang twice. "Sheriff's office." "Sheriff Tom, it's Elias Vance." There was a pause. "Elias, haven't heard from you since that big blizzard back in '98. What's going on?" "I have WCE contractors trying to build an unauthorized dock on my private river channel without permits." Sheriff Tom's voice instantly went flat. Professional. "You got those deed papers handy?" "Always," I replied. "Good. Sit tight." 10 minutes later, the unmistakable sound of a county sheriff's truck cut through the air. Tom stepped out, hat low, sunglasses on, and walked straight past me to Constance. "Ma'am, I need to see your permits for construction on this body of water." Constance's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We're restoring community access." "That wasn't my question, ma'am." Tom's voice was flat. She hesitated, pulling a flimsy folded paper from her clipboard. Tom glanced at it, handed it right back. "This permit is for maintenance on WCE property." "This river is not WCE property." Constance's jaw tightened so hard I could see the muscle twitching. "Sheriff, you don't understand the complex situation here." "I understand it perfectly fine," Tom cut her off. "Pack it up, now!" The workers froze mid-swing. Constance shot me a look of pure, concentrated malice, then snapped at her crew. They loaded the dock back onto the flatbed. As she slid into her black SUV, she paused just long enough to tell me one thing. "This isn't over." I believed her. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. Then came the newspaper article. It wasn't a full-blown attack. It was a front-page community concern story about how a single, reclusive landowner was damaging property values and isolating longtime residents from shared lake access. No names, of course, but everyone in Pleasant Valley knew exactly who the reclusive landowner was. I cut the article out and pinned it to my wall, not to dwell on it, but to remember exactly how far they'd go to twist the narrative. They weren't trying to beat me in court anymore. They were trying to beat me in the court of public opinion. They wanted to make me the villain in my own story. So I decided to flip the script. I called my friend Joe, who runs the local Veterans Outreach Center. I told him I wanted to host a massive event, not just for the vets, but for the entire town. Community River Day, hosted by Elias Vance. No WCE restrictions, no special permissions, just an open invitation for anyone to come fish, eat, and relax by the water. When the day came, my property was packed. Families, kids, old-timers who remembered my grandfather. Sheriff Tom even stopped by for a plate of ribs. And here's the kicker. I had a local news crew there. They filmed everything. Kids laughing, boats tied up along my docks, me shaking hands and flipping burgers like I was running for mayor. The story that aired 2 nights later didn't paint me as a villain. It painted me as a generous landowner sharing his private piece of the river with the community, in stark contrast to the distant, unneighborly WCE. Constance must have been absolutely livid. Because 3 days after that, I got a notice from the county zoning office. A random inspection of my property had been scheduled to verify compliance with local codes and inspect all structures. It was harassment. Pure and simple, but I was ready. I called Frank Miller, the best lawyer in the state, a grizzled old guy who didn't wear a suit unless he had to. When the inspector showed up, Frank was there, and so was my camera crew from Community Day. Every shed, every dock, every gate was up to code. I even made sure the inspector saw the original certified deeds hanging on my wall. By the time he left, he looked apologetic, embarrassed to even be there. That night, the real ugly part began. At midnight, the far bank lit up with floodlights. Generators hummed. Music blared, not the good kind, the headache kind. It went on until 2 a.m. The next night, same thing, only louder, with air horns and sporadic shouting. It was petty, it was childish, and it was designed to make me snap, but I didn't. I just kept my list, times, dates, details. And I called my tech friend Carl. We set up those directional microphones along the bank, hidden just like the cameras. They didn't just record the noise. They picked up the conversations. And those conversations were gold. In one clip, "Clear as day," I heard a voice say, "If we keep this up, he'll have to give in. His nerves will crack." Another caught someone laughing about messing with Vance's gates again. Evidence. Undeniable, admissible evidence. I didn't send it to the WCE. I held onto it like a high-stakes poker hand, waiting for the final push. The end came on a night so quiet, it felt wrong. No generators, no lights, just the sound of the creek moving slow under the moonlight. I was on my porch, same as always. Then I heard it, a single soft metallic clink from downstream. Then soft footsteps on the gravel bank. I stepped quietly off the porch, flashlight in hand. As I got closer, I saw the shadows, 2 figures, maybe 3. One had a crowbar, another bolt cutters. They weren't here to make noise this time. They were here to take the gate down completely. I stepped out from the trees and hit the spotlight. The blinding beam caught them dead on. One dropped the crowbar and stumbled backward into the mud. The third just froze, hands up. "You're trespassing," I said. My voice was low, steady. One of them mumbled something about restoring community access. I took a step closer. "No, you're committing felony breaking and entering on private property." Just then, the trees behind me lit up with the blinding red and blue flash. Sheriff Tom's truck pulled up fast. He took one look at the scene, then at me. "You got it on camera, Elias?" I nodded. Every angle. Every second. Within minutes, the 2 who hadn't bolted were in cuffs. Tom didn't waste time. He read them their rights and walked them back to the truck. When it was over, he turned to me. "Mark, you ready to finish this?" I was more than ready. The next morning, Frank and I filed everything. The trespass footage, the microphone recordings of them admitting their plan, the logs of every night they blasted noise, the photos of every piece of damage. It wasn't just a complaint. It was a lawsuit. Harassment, trespass, destruction of private property, and thanks to Frank's surgical legal work, a demand for punitive damages that would make the WCE choke. We served them right in the middle of their monthly board meeting. I heard later Constance turned white as the paper. 2 weeks later, we had our day in court. The WCE lawyers tried to spin it as me being unreasonable, blocking a public waterway. And then Frank stood up. He laid out my certified deed, the audio clips of board members plotting, and the video of 2 men caught red-handed with bolt cutters. By the time he was done, the judge wasn't just frowning. She was furious. Her ruling came down hard. The WCE was to cease all attempts to access, alter, or interfere with my property immediately. They were responsible for replacing every single thing they'd damaged, covering all my legal fees, and paying substantial punitive damages for organized harassment and malicious destruction of private property. It was a win, not just on paper, but in every way that mattered. Back at the cabin, I stood on the porch looking at my gates. The river was calm. The sun was setting in gold across the water, and I felt the fight drain out of me. But here's the thing, it wasn't just about winning. It was about showing them, and everyone watching, that you don't roll over just because someone with a title and a big checkbook says you should. The WCE stopped sending letters. The noise vanished. Months later, I saw the listings in the paper. They sold off 2 of their premium lakefront homes at a massive loss. Nobody wanted to pay millions for a house with no water access. And every time I pass those now empty docks, I remember the day they tore down my bridge and how sure they were that they had won. They hadn't won. They had just started a fight they couldn't finish. And now I own the gates. I own the river. And I own every quiet, beautiful morning that follows. The fight's over. But the question remains. If someone tries to take your home, your land, your peace, not with a handshake, but with a chainsaw, would you fight until they broke? Or would you walk away before the battle even began? Let me know in the comments below. What's the craziest thing your HOA or your neighbor has ever tried to pull, and how far did you go to stop them? Like this video if you think the little guy always deserves to win, and subscribe so you don't miss the next time the deed is done.